Welcome to the podcast with Lloyd Chapman and Bruce the Taurus. We are both of the American Small Business League. It is Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. How are you this evening, Lloyd?
Hey, how's it going, buddy?
It's going great. And I'm glad
So,
we're, yeah,
you want to talk about what we talked about? We were talking about,
I think we should talk about it.
all right, the Trump assassination attempt.
Yeah.
So, I was on a Boy Scout rifle team when I was 10, and I'm from Texas, and I've got lots of guns. I've got a, pretty good sniper rifle in my garage right now, right? And I know a lot about guns, and I don't think that guy that everyone thinks was the shooter. I don't think that was I don't think he was a shooter.
No?
And I think there was a plot to kill Trump. Nothing about it adds up. It's like all these other things. Like the JFK assassination. They said Lee Harvey Oswald, did it all alone. And again, you can't shoot somebody in the back of the head and have their brains go on the trunk. You can't do that.
Nope.
If you shot somebody in the back of the head, their brains be all over the people in the front of the car, be over the windshield, right? But
Right.
here's what I found fascinating about the Trump assassination attempt. No one's talking about it. So he's elected president, and one of the first things I want to know is who the hell tried to kill me, right? That'd be the first thing I'd talk about. I would say I'm gonna get to the bottom of this. I'm gonna find out, nothing. He hasn't mentioned it.
No.
Now, why would that be?
I can't imagine, but I was thinking the same thing last week, actually.
Yeah, I'll tell you why he hasn't mentioned it. Because he knows who it was. And he knows that they could, well, my opinion is he knows they can take him out if they feel like it. And he doesn't want to piss him off any further, maybe, right? But
Yeah.
none of that makes sense.
Right.
The picture I saw of that guy's rifle, he had an AR-15 with what's called a red dot sight, our quick acquisition sight. That's something you would use if you were a soldier clearing buildings. That's not what you would use for long range shooting, right? The other thing that I find impossible to believe is that the guy was on a rooftop. I think it was between 400 and 500 feet away.
I forget.
I just looked it up. It said, between 400 and 500 feet. And he got up on the roof and was there for, like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
My recollection is they saw him 20 minutes before Trump stood up to talk.
A number of people saw him, and a number of people pointed him out to either security or police on the scene.
Yeah. And by the way, there's no way that those people didn't have a common channel. That'd be the most basic thing. If they didn't have that, by the way, they're all idiots. So one of the
Mhm.
most basic things they would have, they all have, the same channel so they can talk to each other, right? And I mean, how many cops saw the guy on the roof? Like four or five or six. He pointed a gun at one guy, right? But as soon as the first person saw him, they go, shooter on the roof, shooter on the roof, all alert, shooter on the roof, right? That didn't happen. They let Trump stand up 20 minutes after 20 minutes after they saw this guy. And then he's got a rifle with what's called, I call him a red dot sight, a quick, it's a little square thing. It's not a
Mhm.
scope, right? And his bullets, I would say, were within maybe a 3 foot circle,
Okay.
right? Maybe even smaller. I couldn't do that.
Mm.
I mean, I've been shooting for 65 years, right? I've got little Boy Scout merit badges for shooting all over the place, right? Yeah, without a scope, it's really hard to get that many shots in
Yeah.
that tight of a circle, right?
It's amazing that it's been, put in the memory hole, to quote George Orwell's 1984. It's just astounding.
Yeah.
It's
But
forgotten.
nothing about it makes sense.
Nope.
There's not one thing. Well, that's normal. So
No.
so they've got pictures of the guy, walking around with a rangefinder before the event. You put that guy in the back of a police car, take him, find out what the hell he's doing, right? As soon as you see that.
Right.
Um, and the whole thing about his family, I mean, we know nothing about this guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
We know nothing about him, right? And I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard that when he went to his house, there was no silverware in the drawers. And the house looked like it had been, cleaned out. I saw with my own eyes on the internet an FBI guy washing his blood off the roof. That should have been taped off as a crime scene for a couple of days. Why were
Yeah.
they washing the blood off the roof, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense. Oh, and his body was cremated pretty quickly,
Quickly.
right?
Yeah. I think within
Uh,
weeks, couple of weeks, maybe.
oh, okay, it was days. His
Ah,
body, it was within days, right? When you look back at the Kennedy assassination, there was autopsy photos of Oswald, lots of photos of Oswald dead, right? I don't recall. I saw one kind of a picture looking like it was on the roof. It was kind of like, what do you call it? Kind of blurred
blurred.
out,
Yeah.
read out,
Yeah.
Where are the autopsy photos? Where are the
Where's the release of the big investigation? Was there a big investigation,
yeah,
official investigation? Where's the
yeah,
final report? Now, I haven't searched for these things. Maybe it's available. I don't know.
yeah. Well,
I haven't, no news announcement.
I just think it's amazing that no one in Congress, no one in the Trump administration says we're going to get to the bottom of this, and find out who the hell is behind this, right?
It is
What I
amazing.
heard, I don't know if it's true, but what I heard was that everyone that was on that protection detail that day was replaced the following day. And I should have done more research before we started talking about it. But I heard that a lot of people there that day were Homeland Security people and not Secret Service people.
I heard things like that.
Yeah,
I heard that the regular Secret Service around Trump were protecting maybe Jill Biden somewhere else in Pennsylvania. It was a real cluster mess, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
But again, there's not one piece of it that makes sense. Oh yeah, that's reasonable, right?
No.
Uh,
Well, you make a good point that Trump isn't looking into that for a compelling reason. And what that reason is, we can speculate now. We can wait for the historians to come out, with some real deep research over the next few months or years. It might be years before anything like a real trustable evidence comes out. It's really it's disturbing
and it's typical America, right?
nowadays. Nowadays,
Typical. Yeah, I don't recall an assassination or assassination attempt that made sense, that was logical and reasonable, right? I've heard uh, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talk about his dad's assassination, and he says Sirhan didn't do it.
I agree.
He said they could account for every bullet from his gun, either in somebody's body or in the wall. Uh, None of them hit his dad, right?
Right. None of the
Uh,
bullets in his dad plausibly came from Sirhan.
yeah.
None of
So
them.
this kind of falls in line with all these assassination attempts in America, right? But
And
if
and
you're
there's a
if
there's
you're
a there's a point of whoever did it, not caring that we can see the things that don't make sense because that's even more upsetting to us to know, like, wow, we're being lied to, and they got away with it, whoever they
they're actually
are.
like, and what do you think you're going to do about it?
Right.
Right. Here's
Right.
what I thought was interesting today. So, I've been on X talking about these government AI censorship programs. I don't know if we talked about that in any of our shows, but yeah, there's no question that they're there. You can Google it.
Yep.
It's in the historical record. Civil Sanctuary and WASDEX are Pentagon created
Yep.
AI censorship programs running on all social media, particularly X, right?
Yep.
And I'm censored like crazy. Um, so I'm on X, and I forgot how it got started, but someone said something about the Trump assassination, and I can tell when someone's a bot by their profile. It's a typical bot profile. When you look at my X account, I would say, 90% of the posts are me, stuff I wrote and stuff I put on there. When you
Hmm.
look at a bot, they'll have one original post, then everything else is RTs. And
Retweets. Right.
and they're random. Yeah, retweets. And they're random. They're
Yeah.
not all about, one thing. So
Right.
if I were going to retweet, it'd be all about, small businesses and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But you'll see some guy whose original post is about one thing, and then his retweet is about, how to train Labradors, and the next one is about, uh, John Wayne, it's just totally, it looks like they were just put together just kind of randomly, right? Like this guy that looked like a bot account started debating me about the Trump assassination. And it sounds kind of funny, but I can tell when someone's AI. AI, by the way, is not so sophisticated that they still have that kind of robotic speech patterns, right? And they don't use colloquialisms, you know. They'll
Hmm.
go as opposed to saying, I don't go there. They go, I do not go there. All right. So kind of that Will Robinson, danger, danger kind of a thing, right?
That's funny.
But so this kind of robotic bot account was arguing with me about the Trump assassination, and it was quite fascinating. And then some guy, another kind of bot account says, "Well, it wasn't Zelensky."
That's funny.
Yeah, right. And I never thought
That's
about that,
funny.
but let's just see if we're trying to find out who's behind it. Zelensky probably knew if Trump was elected that he was going to stop all the funding. I think didn't Trump say he was going to do that before he was elected? So
Well,
let's
he
just say
sends so
so.
many mixed signals. Who knows?
Yeah.
I can't
Well, let's just say
remember.
this. I think that was pretty clear. I could be wrong, but I think it's pretty clear that if he was elected, he was going to stop. He said he was going to bring peace. That's right. He said he'd
Wow.
bring peace within, 20 minutes, some crazy thing
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. The next day or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
And so that means you're not getting any more money,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah. Maybe.
those guys had a motive, right? Anybody that thought their funding was going to get cut off if Trump was elected would have a motive, right?
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
anyone that was getting a lot of money from the American government during Biden that thought it was going to get cut off under Trump, they would have a motivation to try to, kill him, right?
Yeah.
But
My distrust is to the point, Lloyd, that I wouldn't put it past some powerful faction or factions being able to pull off the shooting like that and intentionally missing in order to make Trump a hero. It could have been a faction that was behind Trump. That's how untrustworthy the mainstream portrayal of events is to me after decades of research.
I'll tell you something. That shot that grazed his ear, that would have gone right through his head. I don't think they missed him on purpose. I mean, that's too close. I mean, quite frankly, nobody can shoot that good, right?
Well,
Nobody's
okay.
that good. That
Okay.
that was, like that much, right? So it grazed his ear, but my recollection was he was looking this way, then he turned that way and it grazed his ear.
Yeah, it was just about that quick after a turn to the right. Yeah.
Yeah, if he'd stayed this way, it would have gone through his head, right? So it's going like this, and he turns his head, and it went like that. But if he hadn't turned his head, it would have hit him right there.
I could imagine the richest of the rich having tech and also shooters whose magnification, like during baseball games, sometimes the camera will zoom in on the moon and
Right,
you can see a crater like that. I
right.
could imagine a shooter having the equipment where,
All right.
like my nostril would be as big as like this big, and they just waited for that one
You know what?
second. I don't know.
Here's the killer. You ready? They had no way of knowing he's going to turn his head at that time.
But if you're in such a tight close up of a head and you've seen his movements for 20 minutes and you've got your crosshairs right
You know
there.
what?
Is there a shooter and is there
That
tech that could
that bullet
squeeze?
that bullet hit him so quick and turned his head that they had to have pulled the trigger when he was looking this way. Right? It's not. It takes a while for a bullet to go that kind of distance. Right? You might be right, but
I
he wants to say this. None of it adds up, and the fact that we don't know a damn thing about that guy right now, and everyone dropped it. Everybody dropped it.
It's so crazy.
Everybody dropped it,
Well,
except you and me.
yeah, and right until it circles back and you wonder about it. And good for you bringing it up because you know what? In another year or so, there's going to be tons of young people who don't even believe it happened because it's
Uh,
not in the conversation anymore. But that's also attributable to the rush of events, catastrophe after catastrophe.
yeah,
And I'm glad you brought it up because it's a it's a it's a case in point for our whole mission. And I hope you don't mind. Could we? I want to kind of swing into our work
Up
to
to you.
just,
Go ahead.
fill out, the rest of the show. We wanted to do just a tight little 30 minutes, And I wanted to ask you, what we've been, we talk every day. We work together every single day.
Yeah,
And I'm very excited about the Fairness and Transparency in Contracting Act that you helped Representative Hank Johnson, is it?
Hank Johnson. Yeah.
About 10 years ago. And it's still there as a proposed piece of legislation, right? It could be championed by current members of the House and and brought to evaluation, couldn't it?
I don't know. I didn't know it was still under consideration.
Well, on the website, it just says it was introduced on the official House website, and there's no other action. And there's a series of things like, well, then it would be seconded, or then it would be submitted to
Yeah.
committee. It's just hanging there. And I'll find out with a little bit of research.
Yeah.
But Lloyd, how would you evaluate that as an organizing principle and goal for our work in general to get a piece of legislation like that getting so much support from so many regular people that the House and the Senate are so pressured that it gets into the national conversation?
I don't think the American people could generate enough pressure to get Congress to pass that bill. Yeah, because the Pentagon doesn't want it. And if everybody in America want that bill to get passed, but the Pentagon doesn't, it's not going to get passed because the American people have no clout. How are the American people going to lobby Congress and let their representatives know? We're going to call them, right? By the way, there's a huge story about that. We could make a movie about that, right? I'll give you some quick details on it. I was trying to find a way to get the government to quit giving small business contracts to Fortune 500 firms. Some of my attorneys told me that the Small Business Act defines a small business being independently owned, which would preclude publicly traded companies.
Hmm.
And so my goal was to write the shortest bill in the history of America. I wrote it on the phone pad at, I think it's the Doubletree Inn in Durango, Colorado. And it said this: the government will no longer report awards to publicly traded firms as small business awards.
Wow.
That's right. The government will no longer report awards to publicly traded firms as small business awards. And Barbara Boxer helped me, put it into the right format, which is, several pages, right? And then Hank Johnson helped me with it. He's the one that actually introduced it. But what a no-brainer. Don't give federal small business contracts to Fortune 500 firms. What a
Hmm.
no-brainer.
Yeah.
It never passed. It never made it out of committee. And back in those days, I kind of knew John Kerry a little bit. I had his cell phone number, and he would call me, and I would call him sometimes. And his people and his staff, and they said that someone on Diddy Velasquez's staff said that she says she'll guarantee won't make it out of committee. So a Democrat on the House Small Business Committee, I think she might have been the ranking member, the chair. She said that she would guarantee that would never make it out of committee. Why?
Yeah.
Yeah, why? What they did pass started off being called the Safe Harbor from Fraud Penalties policy. So, as opposed to passing a law that says Fortune 500 firms can't get small business contracts, they passed a law that says if you're found guilty of felony federal contracting for misrepresenting your firm's status as a small business, but basically all you have to do is say I acted in good faith and you're off the hook. Can you
That's
believe
what they
that? So
passed.
they basically passed a piece of legislation to encourage people to commit fraud. Isn't that shocking? And
Well,
that was like 15 years ago or more, something like that.
no, it's not shocking to one like me who studies this stuff. But for the sake of anyone watching or listening, whom this is the first time they've ever heard or seen Lloyd Chapman, American Small Business League, how would you describe the crux of the matter to someone discovering us for the first time? What are these guys talking about? What are the basics of the problem?
Federal law says 23% of all federal contracts should go to small businesses. 98% of all U.S. firms have less than 100 employees. So 100 employees would be the largest, size standard you would use. And it's been reported for over 20 years that billions a month in federal small business contracts are knowingly, intentionally diverted to Fortune 500 firms and their subsidiaries and knowingly large businesses. Um,
And the SBA falsifies compliance with that 23%
yeah,
goal.
yeah. They do it in two ways. First of all, they exclude a huge a portion of federal acquisitions from that calculation. I've heard up to gosh, almost half of it. And then they include contracts to Fortune 500 firms and their subsidiaries. So,
How do they exclude that first 50%?
they've got, all these policies that came up. So the Small Business Act says it's 23% of the total value of all federal contracts and subcontracts. But they came up with policies. Well, we're going to exclude this, we're going to exclude that, we're going to exclude the CA, we're going to exclude the post office, but that's not what the law says, right? Those are policies. My impression is you can't have a policy that supersedes a law.
Wow.
But by the way, the congressional intent and the law was to give small businesses 23% of all federal contracts, which seems very reasonable. Yet 99.9% of all U.S. firms are small businesses. Yeah, let's give them 23%. By the way, if 99.9% of all U.S. firms are small business, that just means 1/10 of 1% are large businesses. So if the government ever did comply with the Small Business Act and ever did give small business 23%, which they've never done, that would mean that 99.9% of all U.S. firms get 23 and 1/10 of 1% are getting 77.
Which is an outrage in itself.
That's stupid. It's
Yep.
stupid. By the way, that 1/10 of 1%, the Government Accountability Office put out a report in 2023 that said 34% of those guys pay zero federal income tax.
Yeah.
I saw a report, gosh, over 10 years ago, I think from the Kauffman Foundation, that said that top 1/10 of 1% hasn't created one net new job in over 40 years. So, we're getting,
All this and more is on our website,
yeah,
asbl.com. I want to pretend that I'm, not your friend and your coworker, but I'm just another podcaster who's hearing this, everything you've said for the first time. And forgive me if this sounds like I don't want this to sound like a gotcha question or a hard question, but
go ahead.
if we're not going to try to inspire the American people, to inspire Congress to pass a law that protects those contracts for small businesses, what should we be trying to do?
Well, Trump says he's going to make America great again. What does that mean exactly? For example, what year was it that America was great that we want to try to make it like that again? Right? If you ask me, I would say during the Clinton administration. During the Clinton administration, the economy was roaring. Remember the dot-com boom? It was just going crazy, right?
Yeah,
Um, when he left office, there was a surplus.
yeah,
So when you say make America great again, to me, I'd want to go back to the Clinton years because that's when the economy was the strongest. That's when he left office with a surplus. There were no terrorist attacks, no wars, nobody was getting killed, right? So that to me sounds like where I want America, to go back to, right? And he was super pro small business, right? So, if you want to make America great again, I would think one of the most basic things is to create jobs and have a strong economy, right? That's the
yeah.
most fundamental thing, right? Small business create 90% of all net new jobs, so if you want to, have a strong economy, you need to give small businesses more contracts, and Trump's going to give them less. He's already cut the annual volume of federal contracts to small businesses by just under $80 billion a year when he cut the goal for minority-owned small businesses from 15 to 5. And according to a report by the Senate Small Business Committee, that's going to cost us 1 million jobs a year. That's about a 48% reduction from one year to the next. That's never happened before, by the way. So, again, this is a long story, but the jobs report is considered by people around the world as the strength of the U.S. economy. The stock market, rises and falls on that. International markets rise and fall. Federal Reserve policy is based upon that. So when Trump cut contracts to small businesses by 10%, that's going to cost us 1 million jobs. And the jobs report's not going to look at with all these people he's firing in Washington.
Right,
So unemployment's going to be up,
right.
and job creation is going to be down, which is going to make the stock market go down. Hell, it went down yesterday, right? So
Yeah,
it's gone down 2 days in a row. By the way,
yeah,
I've been predicting that Trump's going to crash the economy, for months.
yeah.
So, looks like I was right. Anyway,
About many things, about many, many things. I really encourage everyone to wrap their heads around everything that we've discussed, everything we've shared. And we've hit the duration or the length, which was kind of our target. I think
yeah,
this is a rich, capture. Lloyd, what would you add or, augment about what we've said or add to what we've said?
a few days ago there was some kind of thing was a small business day where people are supposed to, buy from small businesses. People should make every day small business day. Every day should be small business day. People should make an effort to buy from a small business. Small business is the heart and soul of our nation's economy. It's 99.9% of all U.S. firms. They create 98% of all net new jobs. So people should make an extra effort as opposed to buying it on Amazon. Get your car, drive down the street, and buy it from a small business. It's
Mm.
good for America. It's quite frankly, what can a U.S. citizen do that's patriotic and help the country? Buy from a small business. So every day should be small business day.
Truly. And when folks go and find the unbelievable amount of information on our site, asbl.com, I am hoping for great things as we get the word out, and you and I are going to work mightily this year, day after day, to get this word out. And if we
Yep,
can't think of all the solutions, we want people to propose things to us because we want to create something of a movement. We want to create a coalition. We don't want to be the only ones talking about this kind of
yep,
stuff. We want to find everyone who might be talking about this. There don't seem to be that many of them, right?
yep. Let me close with this. You're doing fantastic. You are amazing. You're smart. You're amazing, Bruce. You're doing fantastic. I couldn't have gone on without you. You're just doing fantastic. I'm so glad we came together to do this together, Bruce. So thank you very much, buddy.
Well, thank you. And I'll tell you what you've heard from me before. From our first conversation 2 years ago, when I invited you to be interviewed on my one of my old shows, I've done a few podcasts since then. We've hit it off like this. I thought about this today, Lloyd. It's like every day for 2 years, whenever we do talk, it's just a continuation. It's the perpetual conversation. And to me, that's been my hallmark of great friendships and just also sympathetic, like-minded on the particular things that we do discuss. So I appreciate what you just said tremendously, Lloyd.
All
Thank you
right.
very
I
much.
mean it sincerely.
I appreciate that, and I'm honored to work for you and to join the team and to try to wrap my arms around this and my mind around it and to fulfill the things you see that should be done and to propose things that might be helpful. That's why I ask a lot of questions because you've been doing this almost 40 years and I've been getting to know you just for two, and I've been on the job for 4 weeks, so I'm still like groping around, like, well, is this possible? Is this? And more often than not. You've been there, you've tried that, been there, done that. You got the t-shirt, and yet you do encourage me with my little experiments. And oh, why not? And you also trust me, like, well, you figure out what to say. You draft it, you send it to. And I just love that because I love being creative and I love experimenting and seeing, like, does this cause an effect? Does that cause an effect? So blah, blah, blah. Thank you, Lloyd.
We're gonna have a lot of fun.
Amen. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching and
All right.
listening. If you like this, I want everyone to share this around, whether you're watching the video or listening to the audio. It's really amazing. It's really an amazing reality. All right, that's it. Till next time. Thank you very much.